Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Tamer Al-Rakhi, and I have the honor to be actually introducing our guest speaker today, Jacqueline Novogratz. But before I do that, I would like first to thank the Gard Center for giving me that opportunity and for all the great audience that are joining us today from, oh gosh, I see the names and from different parts of the world. And it's always nice to see some friends among the audience. Jacqueline is simply, I always look at her as simply one of those few pioneers that led the way into impact investing, a very, very, a subject that's very close to my heart, I have to say. And I have to make a disclaimer that I manage a fund that's sponsored by Acumen in Africa. So making that disclaimer. So Jacqueline is kind of my boss, let's put it this way. I know that she might not like that because that puts some liability on her time-wise, but it's a fact of life that she has to talk to me from now and then. Jacqueline is actually, she's a rebel. She's someone who left Wall Street and started a movement to fight poverty through investment. Basically, her concept at the beginning, which is what Acumen is based on, is to use philanthropic money to invest in ethical entrepreneurs that are leading a very early stage, high risk companies where VCs wouldn't invest in. As a result, over the past 20 years roughly, Acumen has raised over $300 million in non-returnable, as in philanthropic, and returnable, as money from commercial investors, like the fund I'm managing. Along the way, Acumen invested in more than 140 companies. Acumen is now active in 15 countries. Acumen Academy has over 700 fellows, and Acumen impacted more than 300 million lives, guys. That's a lot of people. That's 3 times the population of Egypt, just to put things in perspective. Not only that, Jacqueline herself is a writer, and she's a damn good writer, actually. If you have not read her 2 books, the Blue Sweater and the Manifesto for Moral Revolution, I urge you to do so. Both books are eye-openers, and definitely you will not regret to read them. Last but not least, Jacqueline and Acumen are not strangers to Egypt. As a matter of fact, 2 of Jacqueline's very early investments, Sikkim and Nadim Furniture, were in Egypt. So Jacqueline, Egypt is calling you again, and welcome to Egypt virtually. Hopefully next time you come in person. And Dr. Ali, it's all yours right now.
Thank you, Tamer. Jacqueline, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Now, I will ask you a few questions, for 20, 25 minutes. And then after that, we'll open the floor for Q&A. Now, my first question to you is, you have started Duty Rembre early in your career, and then Acumen Fund. My question is, what did you learn from Duty Rembre that you have implemented in Acumen Fund, and how do you compare the social impact for both?
Well, first, Ali, I just have to say thank you so much to you, to the Gerhardt Center, and to my dear friend, Tamer, for his beautiful introduction. There is something, even though I'm not physically in Cairo, there is something about Egypt that is so full of warmth and welcome. So just excited to be in this conversation. What did I learn in starting Duty Rembre, which was the first microfinance bank in Rwanda, where I had gone as a former banker? Probably 4 things, Ali. One was that the opposite of poverty isn't wealth, it's dignity. That at the time, women in Rwanda made about $112 per year. And this whole idea that income was enough became so clear to me to be erroneous. But what women, like all of us, wanted was to be seen, to have choice, to have opportunity, and that was dignity. The second thing was that institutions matter, and that in building a bank with co-founders who were local Rwandans, we created the seeds of something that still exists 30 years later, and that had a real role to play, including after the genocide, even though it was conceived 7 years prior to the genocide and went through untold treachery and loss. The institution continued. The third is the power of investment as a means, not as an end. That too often we think either in this very bifurcated way. I make my money here, I give it away there. Already in Rwanda in the early 80s, I was seeing that you could use the tools of business to create change, but you didn't have to be owned by those tools. And then finally, that market access is a form of freedom, as the economist Amartya Sen has written. But if you don't give people the capabilities to actually interact with those markets, it's all for naught. And so those were really the lessons that then I tried to bring forward in building Acumen with, as Tamer said, patient capital at its center. That if you saw poor people as full human beings, agents who wanted to have more control in their own lives, and you built businesses that provided for them in ways they could access, value, and afford, then we could actually do a better job at solving some of the critical problems and enable local people to ultimately solve those problems themselves. You're on mute.
Sorry. I'm going to also to sort of have a quote from Amartya Sen, who said poverty is a human rights violation, which goes with what he's saying. It's about dignity. It's about having an option, having a choice. Now, my second question that I want to get into, because you're a pioneer in this, is about the confusion in impact investment. I've heard Jed Emerson says that he was quoting something from Saturday Night Live. He was saying that it's a floor wax and it's also a dessert topping. You hear people and you hear different. So my question to you, and again for a layman who doesn't know much about investment, what makes an investment an impact investment?
For the layman, because Jed Emerson and you, Ali, are right. There's this wide spectrum, and right now everybody puts themselves into this big pool called impact investing. But in layman tools, it's simple. It's investing in ways that create social impact for the good. There are some that just assume that an intention to not do harm is enough, or they'll screen out really bad. Acumen is different. We look at impact first. What is the problem that we're solving? And then we invest in order to do that. And between the two is a lot of noise and a lot of difference.
Okay. As a leader and pioneer also of social entrepreneurship, what is really missing to create a movement capable of delivering a really tangible impact? Is it true that social entrepreneurs in general tends to be top bottom? And I'm not going to go and label them, some of them, by elitist. Now, how do you get community-led owned, something like Rembre, like you've mentioned? It's owned by 800 women. This is as community-led and owned as it gets. What can be done about this to sort of make social entrepreneur a movement and get it more to be community-driven or community-led?
Well, I actually think, Ali, that's a complex question, and that some of the most effective social entrepreneurs who do not come from community actually have the humility to work with community in ways that build capability, transfer knowledge, and ultimately transfer wealth, and in the best of cases, ownership. An example of that would be Azahar Coffee in Colombia, where the entrepreneur, Tyler Youngblood, is not Colombian. He is definitely an elite. However, what he understood almost as an outsider, as an advantage, was that coffee as a commodity has been so colonial in its whole orientation that farmers around the world, poor farmers, smallholder farmers, are paid according to global commodity pricing. So Brazil could have a bumper crop that sends the price way, way down, and Colombia could have a very small crop. And those farmers who worked equally as hard and paid equally as much lose their shirts. And so what Tyler did was insist on changing the rules of capitalism and start with the poor, start with the farmers themselves, understand what it costs the farmers to produce, negotiate a price that wasn't just covering their costs or even minimum wage, but was a living wage for those farmers. Recognize that low-income people need stability as much as they want price increases. And so negotiated over a 3-year period, and then made everything transparent, creating a community of trust. So if you look at those Azahar farmers, and there are about 1,500 of them, they make 3 to 4 times the global commodities price. The companies like Stumptown and other companies along the supply chain are increasingly glad to pay those prices because their customers are happier and their employees are happier. And so, yes, are there social entrepreneurs that are elite and think they have the ideas? I would say those are not the ones that usually succeed. The ones who start with community and are willing to be proximate and base in community and build in not only capability, but wealth transference, I think have to be the entrepreneurs of the future. And frankly, we all have to learn to do more of that.
Thank you. I'm going to follow up on this, and I'm going to draw on when you look at the base of the pyramid, researchers or people talking about base of the pyramid, even business and human rights practitioners to some extent. When you look at the North American and European, they tend to focus around large multinationals and what they can do. I'll give you an example. Unilever in India. Unilever in India versus Unilever in Kenya, etc. I mean, that kind of a thing. Danone collecting milk from small milk producers in Sri Lanka, for example. Now, when you look at people coming from India, for example, Sub-Saharan Africa, they go the other way around. They really talk about the role of the local community. How could you develop an enterprise based on the local community? How could the small milk collection, milk farms aggregate in a cooperative and compete with the large ones? So that kind of a thing. I mean, the critical question really is, how do you enable this? How do you encourage this?
Yeah. No, I think it's, I mean, with me and with Acumen, Ali, it always depends. And so part of the answer would be, it depends on the state of the community. So we do a lot of work, and it's funny that I'm talking about Colombia again, but in post-conflict Colombia, where you've got very little income, no trust, where the aid industry for 50 years of civil war has made some of the communities very reliant on assistance. Finding ways to build with community is challenging. And so our team at Acumen, in some cases, spends 2-3 years helping farmers create an association, help them understand the tools of business. Our team right now is working with a community in Cocho, which is one of the most violent and disconnected communities in the Colombian coast, where much of the cocaine was developed. And the community had as you said, from top-down aid. They had a lot of equipment for rice, but they hadn't used it in over 2 years. And so it's really, is this what you want to do? Building the capability, finding the right skills, structuring the financial instrument so that as the community pays off the debt, they own the company. That's why patient capital is needed. And that's why more than capital is needed, because access to markets is fine if you know how to interact and build capabilities. And I think I really underestimated when we started what it would take to actually enable communities to build in ways that really made change. In other cases, Ali, I would say that that having an outsider come in, like with Delight, but again, with the humility of understanding the people they were serving and seeing themselves not as entrepreneurs that were just trying to make money, but that were truly serving low-income people, have long-term developed extraordinary community depth, leaders that are going off to create real change in their communities. And the best example of that would be a company called Delight, which started off with 2 guys that had this idea of bringing solar light to the world and electricity. And they have now reached over 100 million low-income people. They've really set off an energy revolution in the off-grid solar space. But when you look at the thousands of jobs of young people that don't just have work, they have careers. I think it's the way we do things. I don't think there's an either or. It's that character, it's that ethic of realizing that, and this is the moral revolution, realizing that you are there to serve others and to build with moral imagination from their perspective. You need to be profitable because the entity needs to generate the revenues that will allow it to continue and to grow. But your first and primary objective is to solve a problem and to serve people from where they are and understand who they are in doing so.
Lovely. One of the quotes that I've read for you, and I think probably I've heard you saying, is charity versus empowerment. This was one of the first lessons that you've learned when you were trying to sort of implement philanthropy. That it's not about charity, it's about empowerment. Could you elaborate a little bit more about this?
Yeah, I mean, I learned this super fast. It's super early. That generosity is much easier than justice is another way I would say it. And, you know, when I was starting the microfinance bank, I assumed that microfinance would lead to all of these jobs. And in fact, what I learned is that most people aren't entrepreneurs. Most people are surviving. And the credit, as Dr. Yunus would say, is a human right, but it allowed people more access within a market system, but it wasn't creating all of these jobs. And I was thinking, you know, why is that so hard? I'll go create jobs. So I helped start a bakery with 20 unwed mothers. And these women were fully marginalized, called prostitutes by many people in Kigali, the capital city. And I think I suffered, Ali, from a risk, what I would call over empathy. I was so focused on, I didn't like the charity model because I saw these women, they were making about 40 cents per day from a really well-intended group of nuns who wanted to help them. They had no confidence. They didn't understand even the ingredients that were going into the stuff they were making. They wouldn't look at anybody in the eye. And I thought, well, we'll turn this into a business. But I failed myself. And early on, we would send them off into the town to sell these beignets and these little waffles and little cups of tea and coffee. And I noticed that the women were not returning the goods, nor were they returning the money. It was all just getting stolen. And I was so hurt at the beginning, but I realized that I was letting them down, like charity too often lets people down, I was underestimating them. And I was not empowering because I wasn't insisting on accountability. And when I finally, well, a week later, instituted systems of real accountability where we were like, cash in, cash out, goods in, goods out. And I taught the women how finance worked, what the balance sheet was, so that we could all be in it. We had sales sessions, and I made them all owners of this business. Within a year, they were making $4 a day, which in 1987 was enormous. And their confidence went up. They were able to say no to their landlords who had so much control over them. And it changed my life.
Lovely. I'm going to touch on a bigger issue from poverty, which is inequality. Now, when you talk about inequality nowadays, especially in the aftermath of the COVID, you can see it quite evident. You can see it in access to healthcare. You can see it in access to vaccines. I mean, for the first time from a long time, we see in economics, they call it beggar thy neighbor, which is economic policy where you deny or you do whatever is good for you that might be harmful to your neighbor. An example of this actually was in Europe. I mean, the EU, Germany, and France refusing to send masks and ventilators to Italy in the early crisis. Now, this just sort of put, I mean, I don't want to call it a sort of a reset in a bad way, but it is a shocking in many aspects that we still have inequality. And now we can see it evident in a much basic right, which is healthcare, and in even vaccinations. I mean, vaccines are not available to all countries. Vaccines, even within a country, are not available to all population. So what can be done? How could we bridge this gap between the have and not have, the privileged and the not privileged? And I understand this is a hard question and it's lots of structural issues and it takes more than one entity, but I just want to hear your take on it.
Well, first of all, I couldn't agree with you more. One of the great failures, the deep failures of capitalism is that while it created enormous productivity and wealth, it also created a fully unsustainable inequality, which, as you said, we are experiencing across the world. And, you know, Aristotle said that the problem with deep inequality is that the rich end up feeling above the system and the poor feel fully outside the system. And what actually allows societies to move and to build is the middle. And across the world, certainly in my country, we are seeing that middle just disappearing. And so this is not just a national crisis, this is a global crisis. Because, and it goes back to dignity as well. When you feel left out and are left out, the division, the divisiveness also grows. So what can be done on small levels? I mean, this is also the moral revolution. The insanity that the world is not recognizing with a pandemic, that we will not solve it until we solve it for the most vulnerable, is something that we not only have to talk about, but we need to build new systems to address. The COVAX and this whole idea of raising money for developing world countries is a start, but we have to call each other out much more and look to raise the right kind of money and move it. We could do this as a world if we decided that there was a we. It's actually tens of billions of dollars, not trillions of dollars, to vaccinate every human being on the planet. I believe it's been estimated at about $60 billion. But it means moving manufacturing locally, particularly into Africa, where it will be hardest at the last mile. It will be moving those vaccines and the production of those vaccines and building distribution systems. And I actually think in this moment where you have such isolation and loneliness that you could actually build a global core of volunteers that would also be used to get these vaccines at the last mile. This is where I think we need moral imagination, Ali, to see that there are solutions within our purview, even though we recognize the corruption, the nationalism, the individualism that we have to get through. It shouldn't stop us from taking the action.
Great. Another interesting point is that when you think of development in general, sustainable development, it's really horizontal and not vertical. I'll give you a simple example. You go to an African small village and you give them a premium education. If you're not going to put a mechanism there to create decent jobs, those guys are going to migrate. You created a brain drain. So you really have to work on all basic fronts at the same time. And that's rarely happening because of lack of cooperation between the different entities that can deliver the specific verticals. Now, my question is, how do you enable teamwork and collaboration between different NGOs, different civil society organizations, different impact investors, et cetera, et cetera?
I actually think that the good news is we're starting to see the recognition that no single organization can solve the problems themselves. Okay. And I'm certainly seeing this in a new generation that is more willing to collaborate than I've ever seen in my lifetime. And it's certainly something, it's a new skill, frankly, that at Acumen we are also developing. It starts with the will and the decision that we have to collaborate and therefore we must collaborate. When I think about one of the things I'm most proud of at Acumen, it was a crazy collaboration early on between us, a Tanzanian entrepreneur, Exxon, UNICEF, and the Global Fund. What made it difficult was that we all spoke different language. We wanted to create sustainable markets. UNICEF wanted the donors to decide where bed nets would go. The Global Fund wanted to move money as fast as they could to get free bed nets to the world. Sumitomo had the technology. The local entrepreneur wanted to build manufacturing capability. So it was slower, it was harder, it was messy, and yet it created a system that ended up building a manufacturing plant in Arusha, Tanzania that hired 10,000 women, made about 30 million bed nets every year, and to date has supported about 500 million people. And also showing the world that African manufacturing could compete with any manufacturing anywhere else. We need more examples of these kinds of collaborations. Within community, I think it comes down to leadership, to moral leadership, and recognizing what the different players are doing and being much more transparent and deliberate in the way that we communicate with each other. It's hard to do in a broken sector that is set up based on this idea of resource scarcity. And I think part of it is a leadership that moves to a sense of possibility that we've got to do even in this time of fear where people are pulling inward. That's where we need moral leaders.
Lovely. I'm going to have two questions and then I'm going to turn to the audience. My first question is, what is the role of schools of business? What schools of business can do? Let me give you a simple example. I mean, everybody talks about design thinking, and everybody talks about the use of, you have to understand the use of the product by the customer. But then they stop at that. And we don't teach them, for example, ethnography. I mean, when you talk about base of the pyramid, you don't do your classical market research studies that we teach students. They use ethnographic studies, even urban design. When you try to sort of build certain services, health care center, do an ethnography study and you try to understand from the community how they're going to sort of use it. I don't see this in the schools of business, and my sample is limited, of course, but I don't see that graduates of schools of business are taught that at school. So I just want to get your feedback. I mean, are we teaching them right? What do we need to do?
No, we're not. We need to, I think that the real issue is that we have been teaching a lot of content, but we are not teaching character first and foremost. And if I look at those social entrepreneurs that have not only built companies, but have actually changed entire systems, those systems have been driven by the character of those individuals. And it's why I often give this answer of it depends, because show me an entrepreneur with real character, a commitment to the poor, a commitment to financial sustainability in service of change. That person knows how to hold tensions. That person knows how to collaborate and to partner. That person is urgent and gritty and resilient, yet also has that patience to build with people, with community. So one is character. The second is that our business schools are still designed for a definition of success based on money, power, and fame. And so as much as we talk about training and teaching to solve the biggest problems of our world, the skills that we're offering are assuming worlds where everything works, where people are like you. And that is not the world of the 21st century. The only way we will build leaders that will actually transcend lines of difference, build in a time of great inequality, of fear, of division, are to cultivate moral imagination, to really impress upon our students and our leaders of tomorrow how to use identity, not as a way of dividing, but in ways that you can connect across lines of difference, to immerse and get close to the people that you want to serve, proximate in a way that the civil rights leader, Brian Stevenson, would talk about. I believe we need a new curriculum altogether. When I went to business school, Ali, we were taught government was bad, here's how you avoid it. Our business school students of today need to learn what it means to collaborate and partner with government. Because if we are going to truly grow our solutions, particularly in areas like education and healthcare, business by itself is not going to do it. It has to be done in collaboration. So with all humility, and I sit on a number of advisories for business schools, and I feel grateful for my business school education, it needs a reimagination. And it needs a reimagination that is grounded in moral earth.
Yes, I agree. My last question is, many people advocate the use of market to drive change. Now, the caveat there is that most often we have a market failure, resulting in a monopoly, corruption, etc., which is really, you could argue, this is a symptom of a lack of governance. Now, how do you go about this? How do you, and I mean, understand again, when you talk about governance, it takes everybody, including the government. But that's always a problem. I mean, I've seen it in all developing countries, that the number one problem is ecosystem governance, period. And it causes everything else. I just want to hear your take on this.
So I actually have had some of it a different experience. And when we started focusing on patient capital, we started to realize that one of the uses of it was to create markets that didn't exist for the poor before. And off-grid solar electricity is a great example of that. There was no market. If you were poor and you wanted light in your home, you could get kerosene, you could get wood, but there was no clean, affordable light or electricity. And patient capital allowed that market to be created. What I didn't understand is that if done correctly, business could be used as a tool to disrupt loaded, broken government systems, corrupt government systems. And the best example I would have of that, Ali, is ambulances in India. It was a crazy investment that we made in 2007 when an entrepreneur approached us with all of 9 ambulances and a dream that he would take on the multi-billion-dollar ambulance system. It was a system driven by government and government tenders. 90% of people at the time inside ambulances were dead. If you wanted to get your loved one to hospital, better to call a taxi. And it was by disrupting, by showing a model of bringing in the right technology, bringing in a pricing system so that if you were poor, you didn't pay, but if you went to a private hospital, you paid market prices. The government began to see an efficient delivery model with which they could then partner. And that company is one of the largest 5 probably ambulance companies in the world today. It has 13,000 employees, but more important, it set the standards that are now used across India in the emergency services industry. And so I think I've moved from thinking government is corrupt or business is bad to recognizing that we've got some broken systems, to be sure. And right now, most of our systems are broken. But you can find extraordinary individuals within those systems. And if you want to create change, find those individuals, partner, build trust, and move fast, because so often those individuals get eaten by the system. But I've been very positively impacted by what can be done.
Lovely. I'm going to start taking questions from the audience. I'm going to start with Beethoven Tile. Beethoven, would you please unmute yourself?
Yes, of course.
Floor is yours, my dear.
Yes. Thank you, Jacqueline, for accepting our invitation today. Such an honor to meet you virtually. And thank you, Tamer, Melissa, Dr. Ali, for arranging that. I only have a very simple question for you. When can we expect Acumen to operate in Egypt?
Oh, Beethoven, you're as bad as Tamer. You know, I have to say, we came to Egypt after 9/11.
Yes.
Acumen started in April 2001, and we were working in India and East Africa. And what was fascinating is that right after 9/11, I held a roundtable and brought philanthropists together because I was afraid that, like now, in crisis, Americans would pull inward rather than focus outward, and that this was a moment to focus outward. And someone said to me, well, if you were king, how would you respond to 9/11? And with great confidence, I said, well, I would go to the Muslim world and I would invest in those individuals who are building civil society organizations that could show people within and outside their countries what human beings were capable of. And be careful what you say out loud. I got $1 million check a week later, and I literally turned to my team of 3 and said, where is the Muslim world? And how are we even starting? And so really, that was my starting point. And in talking to so many people to try to figure out where we go, we came up with that there were essentially, people said you had to go to 2 places and only 2 places. The first was Egypt, because as Egypt moves, so moves the Arab world. Egypt is the leader, it's the influencer. And then Pakistan, because of its geopolitical significance. And so we went to both and had an extraordinary experience in Egypt. We invested in a company called Nadim, which was a furniture maker that was deliberately hiring women in ways that truly understood the community that they were working with. They had a whole uniform for women in a fairly conservative area that would come in, and you could see the pride of the women as they learned ancient furniture and woodworking techniques, and learn, not surprisingly, what great workers women are. And as Tamer said, a company called Secum, which worked with organics and
Yes.
irrigation even then. And we learned so much with them. And both investments were investments that we felt very proud of. The third was a nonprofit actually called Care with Love. Magdi Skander, who was looking at home care, which is so important right now. Within a few years, it was clear that our tiny team in New York could not handle all of these regions. And so we made the terrible decision, or the hard decision, to stop investing in Egypt. But it is a nation that is incredibly dear to my heart. And so I do hope to return, maybe through Acumen Academy, which Tamer referenced, which is our university for social change, starting with finding change makers across the nation and building from there. But thank you for the question.
Thank
I
you.
do miss Egypt.
We're missing you too.
Thank you.
Okay. Aya Yasser, would you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, sure. First, thank you for the interesting session. I have mainly two questions. First one is, what are the most important internal factors within an organization to create social change and impact societies? And the second one is, how do you measure that social impact? I'm interested to know more in how you are measuring that impact in a marketing point of view with considering the strategic objective.
Thank you. Great questions. You won't be surprised when we think about what internally within an organization matters. Team, and team. That it's who is the leader, and certainly in the early days, that are we betting on a leader who not only has the character, the resilience, the moral imagination, but that they also have a self-awareness to surround themselves with a team of people who are strong where they are weak and who recognize what they themselves aren't able to do. And the best teams have that. The second would be a North Star, that the team is clearly driven by purpose. They can say out loud what their purpose is, and they are driven toward that purpose. And the third is that they are grounded and know the community that they are serving. When you see those three elements, you can often bet on success. Of course, many external factors can come in the way. In terms of how we measure change, a few years ago, Acumen defined something called lean data. One of our tenets is to honor and listen to voices unheard, and we wanted to bring that into the way that we actually measured our impact. And so with cell phone technology, you can text thousands of customers simultaneously, 4, 5, 6,000. You can ask a series of questions. 90% of people, in part because no one's ever asked them, respond to these texts. And from their responses, we can deduce impact from their perspective. If it's in the case of off-grid solar electricity, how many more hours of light are they getting a day? What is the quality of that light? Are their children studying? Is their healthcare better? Or is their health better? Are they earning more income? We can define and quantify carbon that has been mitigated, and on and on and on. And then we can actually compare companies, not just in terms of their financial returns, which are important, but also in terms of their environmental impact, their social impact, the happiness of their customers, because that matters too. And so it's become an amazing tool to align the interests of the investors, the companies, and the low-income customers themselves.
Thank you. Ala Saber, please unmute yourself.
Thanks, Dr. Ali.
Ala, I'm sorry.
Thank you. It's great to see Jacqueline back in Egypt, even though on a screen where we can talk. And I had the pleasure to meet her in 2001 when she came over. Well, I wouldn't repeat the question about Egypt and the Middle East and why Acumen is absent, but is it that social entrepreneurship works in some societies better than others for the nature of these societies in a similar way the discussions on social capital go? Because the research on Egypt, Middle East, there's a whole dispute on issues of social systems and culture, and to what extent they can entertain and nurture ideas like social entrepreneurship. Do you lean toward that kind of hypothesis that, or you think social entrepreneurship should work anywhere as long as circumstances for its presence can be made available? So this is my question.
Allah, no one has ever asked me that question before. And it's good to hear your voice, and it's an extraordinary question. And so I'd really love to think about it. First of all, I have met creative, imaginative, entrepreneurial human beings in every community in which we have operated. And it's been one of the great joys of Acumen Academy. So let me just start there. That second of all, culture does matter, and I think that often comes with confidence, expectations that can work for or against. I'm probably going to get myself in trouble here, but I was really struck in Saudi. We only had 4 Saudi fellows, but we have a big chapter of young Saudis at one point that all wanted to be part of the conversation with Acumen. And so I had the great opportunity to go and meet so many young people with great ideas. And what I found that really fascinated me was that the women were, in some cases, more able to pursue the social entrepreneurship because family expectations were on the men that they would join the family business, and almost expectations were lower on the women who then became social entrepreneurs. Of course, that's not true across the board, and I could show you examples of real entrepreneurial individuals, again, in every nation in which we've operated. It goes to me to this idea that Ali went to, that we were talking about, of accompaniment, of providing that kind of walking with. And it's one of the reasons that I feel so passionate about Acumen Academy and so passionate about including the Middle East into the Academy, in part because we are having a global conversation today. It has been dominated by a conversation about profits and individualism, and a gift that Islam can bring to the global conversation is the importance of community. What can we learn around community over individual? When does it go too far? How do we keep it in balance? I wish, and again, my editor wouldn't even let me write it in a book, and it shows you just how far we've gone as a world where we're afraid to talk to each other. But I actually wish we could start to change our narratives and talk about culture and what we can learn from each other. Because the joy of these 35 years of working all over the world has been to be embraced and to immerse myself in different culture, where I've seen survival, entrepreneurship, everything that makes us human. But I've also seen characteristics that we could share. When I go to South Asia, there is a quality in the way that people love that is really different from other parts of the world, When I go to the Middle East, it's no surprise to you, there is no culture that offers a level of hospitality and what it means to be a guest and brings you in. Africa has so much to teach the world about forgiveness, about resilience. The United States, that optimistic can-do attitude, which I hope it doesn't lose, and so on and so on. I think we need new narratives, and I think we need to let our young people know that we need them to be imagining and building, and parents can sometimes be the biggest part of the status quo that we don't talk about. Not only in not letting their children go and be those entrepreneurs that we need, but sometimes in wanting them to succeed in material terms so much that they value honor and traditional forms of success more than honesty. And that's also why I believe that we need to build community that really celebrates and values our young people in every culture and in every country, and lets them see that in the 21st century, we are all part of each other, and we will rise and we will fall together. We have so much to learn from each other. And I feel more optimistic and have a deeper belief in that today than I did 35 years ago when I was very idealistic.
Lovely. Adham Nadeem, please unmute yourself. Adham?
Hello, Jacqueline and Ali and Tamer. It's been a long time, way too long. I don't want to use a lot of time not saying something of relevance, but I want to report that now at Nadeem, I'm outnumbered. Me and my gender are way outnumbered. And,
I love it.
yes, and at the this is at the management level, at the middle management, and at the executive team. We're set aside. We're trying to form a union or something to get our voice in there. So it's been a long ride, and I think it's paid back. What I really wanted to convey here is this all happens by deliberate choice. You mentioned something of that. It's not an easy decision, and it's something that you have to take and you have to do. You have to go that extra mile. You have to spend on that extra health insurance, on empowering women, on safety at work, and it is a deliberate decision. The other thing I wanted to bring to your attention is it was very influential and very instrumental, the technical assistance we got from Acumen. As much as we're happy that we've left a mark on Acumen, that we're one of 2 or 3 companies that you've worked with in Egypt, Acumen has also left a mark on us, where it's the technical assistance we did get was key in developing the company and its outreach abroad. And through my work, public work involvement in industry at large and at the sector level, we did manage to utilize some of what we gained from the technical assistance with Acumen, and it spilled over the entire sector in Egypt, and that is very key, and that's what I would. It's very nice to say, Jacqueline, when are you coming back to Egypt? But we really need you back in Egypt, and we really need more of this technical assistance. And if I speak for myself as a company, I think now we're ready to take it to the next level, and we need all the help we can get. And many other companies could use that. And I think you should, and please do consider involving Egyptian companies and entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs in Egypt in your busy agenda. And we really do want to see you regardless.
Adham, you're amazing. I just wish I could see everyone. It's so fun to hear these faces, these voices, but I don't see your faces. So I will have to come and see. And you really it just warms my heart. And I'm quite serious, Adham, for you and Hind. I actually will have my team, if it's okay, reach out, because we're doing a lot on gender.
Please.
And when I think about the work you all did 20 years ago, Ali talks about design and what we teach our business school students. There was such empathy and such moral imagination in the way you lovingly designed those uniforms, the way you designed systems so that the women, it was so new, were comfortable. And I frankly have to say, I'm loving that you're outnumbered, Adham. I just think, and I think there's probably a greater chance that these beautiful ancient traditions will be carried forward in modern ways. That's just really exciting. So as I said, I would, if we can find sponsors for the academy side, that would probably be the best way to go in. But in the meantime, would love to catch up with our team on gender, because I think you have a case study that's really important to share with the world. And congratulations to you, to Hind, to the whole family, because what you said about it being deliberate and it coming at with a cost that we too often pretend doesn't exist. But if you are going to build for and with communities that have been overlooked and underestimated, it doesn't happen for free. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Jacqueline, I understand you have a very busy schedule. We have still 4 questions. They've been raising their hands for a while.
I mean, like I said, it's, Egypt has taught me hospitality. I can hang in there.
We can take an extra 10 minutes or so if you don't mind.
Yeah, probably not too much more than 10, but yes.
That's fine. Okay. So Nurhan, please ask your question. Guys, be brief, please.
Sure. Yeah. Are you listening?
Please.
Are you here?
We hear you, Nurhan.
Okay, great. First and foremost, I would love to thank you for the discussion, because we really have learned a lot out of your answers. And I have 3 quick questions. I will not be taking long asking them. My first question is relating to something you have mentioned about that younger generation have to learn how to partner and cooperate with the government. So my question here is how we can do that if what we are doing is in a way or another interfering with the government agenda, for example, how we gain the flexibility so we can get out of this situation in a win-win way. And the other question is relating to something also you have mentioned about over-sympathy. And since we also talking about leadership, so my question here, since leaders rely a lot on sympathy, how we can prevent over-sympathy from happening. And the last question is, what is your take of in the future of impact investment on in a continent like Africa, for example? What is your take?
I'll try to go really quickly, Nurhan, because we have other questioners. So forgive my short answers, but in terms of partnering with government, so Gandhi said it best, and I didn't understand it until I lived it. And that is this: when you are trying to disrupt, at the beginning, you are not working with government, you are disrupting. And so first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. And I think Gandhi was right. When you look at that ambulance company, it was under the radar. It was a private company. Everyone made fun of it. Then it became a problem. and people started to fight it. And now I've realized in so many of our companies, the price of sabotage, of corruption, all of the different parts of the status quo that doesn't want success. But over time, when things work, smart people see that they work and want to use them with their people. And there are real opportunities. And the question then, the key then is finding the right colleagues, the right partners in government. In terms of your second question, I think we mistaken, Machiavelli said it's better to lead by fear, and he would always juxtapose fear and love. And these diametrics are getting in our way. And that another big lesson that I have learned is that real love is difficult. It is hard. And it means not only generosity, but it has to also be met with accountability, to speaking truth, to holding people to account, because you expect good things of them. Because if we expect too little, people will live down to those reduced expectations. And so it's that balance again of the two. And third, I actually think that impact investing will be taken more seriously because we have a new generation that will not work for either investment firms or for companies that do not have a commitment to sustainability, to purpose, to stakeholders. And that will be the same with impact investing. And so that right now you've got this big spectrum. I'm sure Tamer could talk to you all about it at length. There's such an interest now, including on the continent of Africa, from young people to get involved in social impact, either on the business side or on the investing side. So that makes me hopeful.
Okay, Vinay, please unmute, make it to the point, please.
Yes, my question is that, how do you make the impact investing, a lot more, sustainable as far as, because the lot of economic models are getting completely outdated, for example, Keynes and, Adam Smith, etc., prescribe, that the government spending, but the government spending and everything is, leading to a lot more of stock market bubbles, a lot more of, corporate profits, a lot more of, things like that. But there's a lot of greenwashing getting done. So a lot of good good jobs and a lot of next generation capitalism is getting crowded out. So where can we attract much more a lot more investment which can provide a lot more bigger skilled jobs, good skilled jobs, good education which can be sustainable and will not be profit driven, but be a lot more be good for the next generation, and so be much more environment friendly, etc.
So I wish I had, thank you, Vinay. I wish I had a magic wand and we could suddenly have that world. I do think, and that's why I wrote the book Manifesto for a Moral Revolution. The best that I could come up with was that people across the world are tired of broken systems. They recognize that we need to reimagine and rebuild. And the way that I believe we will start to see that acceleration of change is when we see individuals creating the kinds of business models that do put our shared humanity, do put sustainability at the center. And that it's the job of all of us that tell stories, whether we're in the or whether we're teachers, to re-emphasize that our heroes, our business leaders that are successful, don't just have to be the Bill Gateses and the Elon Musks of the world, but they can be the Adams and the Hens, the guys that started this lighting company, D-Light. In India, Avishkar, which is a platform working with very, very poor people, giving them access so that they can understand their rights to access government entitlements. When I see this new generation coming forward, that is what I believe. Not only do we have to nurture, cultivate, we need to link these individuals, we need to celebrate them in a way that we don't do a good enough job at. Because I think once you get enough, then government starts to pay more attention again, and we'll see greater change.
Thank you. Mohammed Inawi, please unmute yourself.
Yes, hello. Hi, Jacqueline. Thank you so much for your talk. It's really inspiring. And I want to take this opportunity to borrow some leadership skills from you. So here's come my question about the leadership, how to develop the concept of leadership among poor people to tolerate the understanding of controlling destiny other than felt controlled by others or by the system, and to motivate them. Yeah, thank you.
So Mohammed, you're also asking a question that's close to me. I don't have a simple answer for you, except that I've been so inspired by individuals that have had the patience to accompany people who have been taught not to think in critical ways. And I think we do a disservice when we raise money for technical assistance that's separate from the company. You heard Adham speak. That was technical assistance that went within the company. And I think that does such a different job, makes such a difference, because critical thinking skills is one of the most important. As you say, Magda Iskander, when she ran Care with Love in Cairo, struggled at times when women would have to make these choices. Very, very low, unskilled women would have a patient that was just being put on dialysis, and maybe the call to prayer would happen, and they would leave the patient at risk of dying. And so Magda would bring them together and have whole conversations about the compromises, the holding the values in tension of what is your purpose in saving a life, and how does that go with what your accountability to some other, whether it's faith-driven or some other obligation that you have, so that people could see that they had their own agency. It doesn't come without the deliberate teaching and the love of helping people get to that other place. In India, we have a maternal health care entity called now I'm spacing, LifeSpring, and low-income women going into the villages again, which is a huge responsibility. And it took the company a while to realize that unless it trained the women who had this idea of destiny, of growing up under authority, of doing only what they were told to do, that they had to make all of these individuals decision makers, and really spent a lot of time on that kind of training so that people could develop their own agency. I actually think that is part of the power of these ethically based, decision-making oriented enterprises that could create, again, not just work, but leadership opportunities for careers. And that starts early in school, and I'd love to see a platform where we start to educate all of our young people to respect their traditions, their religions, and to realize that where they have choice to become who they need to be in the world. And I think that more and more people around the world want to have that conversation.
Last question, we're really stretching your hospitality, but that's the last question. Faris, please make it very brief. Please unmute yourself here, Faris.
Yes. Hey, hi, Miss Jacqueline. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. But I have a really quick question, two quick questions actually. My first question is, can you briefly go over the steps on being a successful entrepreneur? And I believe the first step was to start with your community. Can you continue the other steps? And my second question is, what were the names of the two books you wrote?
So for the first question, there's not actually an easy playbook. I would start where you are with a problem that you see around you, and take a step toward it and see where that step leads you. As you said, immerse, get close to community, understand the systems that are holding people back, and also be honest about where they might be holding themselves back, as we just were in this last interaction, the last question. Build a team that is strong where you are weak, and listen, listen, listen. If there is one quality that differentiates the character of the entrepreneurs that builds these companies, in addition to ethics and the moral imagination, it is grit and it's determination. It's the people who are willing to fall down, try again, fall down, try again, who understand that if you are not willing to succeed, to fail, you have also ruled out success. And entrepreneurship is nothing if not a repeated sequence of failure. But if you do it enough, it will lead to success. And I am living testimony to that, because I have failed so many times along the way. My books are called The Blue Sweater, which has a lot of failure in it of my own. And the second one is The Manifesto for a Moral Revolution, which is really about the 12 practices, not only of entrepreneurship, but entrepreneurship based in a moral framework that I truly believe must be one that accompanies all of us across all of our differences and all of our possibilities and potential.
Jacqueline, I really thank you for a very mind-opening webinar discussion. I also want to thank Beethoven Tayil and Tamer Rakhi for making this happen. It's really been an inspiration. And I thank the participants for staying a little longer. And of course, I thank you for staying an extra 15 minutes with us.
It is such an honor. You make me miss Egypt. And I really love the conversation. And I just wish we were all in person having it and then could go out for a big meal together. But I've just really loved it. And I feel really honored that there's such a memory of the work that we started. If you only knew how much it meant to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Now, for the participants, I really thank you, and I look forward to having you with us next Monday. We're going to have Joya Piotrovic. She's the director of Hamlog, which is in Finland, and he's going to talk about humanitarian logistics and its imperative in the era of COVID-19. Thank you. Again, I thank Jacqueline, and I thank Tamer, and I thank Beethoven. It's been a pleasure to have you all.
Thank you.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you.